I am particularly excited to introduce Hilary Walton from Cordia. So for the last 12 months, I've been working with Fortinet, which is the world's biggest and best cybersecurity platform. And as a result, I spent a lot of time talking, hanging out, observing Hilary. And if I was going to pick an expert to come and talk about pragmatic approaches to cyber security, Hilary would be my pick. And I didn't know that Hilary had previously been on the RiskNZ board. So she belongs here in the room. She's one of us. We're going to mess around with the format. So Hilary's going to talk. We're going to take a bit of time in the middle to give you a chance to chat around the tables about some of the issues you're seeing. Use the Q&A platform, but we'll also do roving mics as well. And we'll have a great conversation. So over to Hilary.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Jenny. That's really kind. And thank you so much for having me here today. Yes, I'm one of you. So I was particularly looking forward to come and speaking to you all because I have worn that risk manager hat in the past. Okay, so I'm Hilary Walton. I like to describe myself as lots of things. If you have heard me speak, you might have seen me do that. But so, for example, I'm currently the Chief Information Security Officer at the Cordia Group. I call myself a risk manager. I've previously been a psychologist. I am also a YouTuber, a podcaster, a mother of three, wife. What I'm saying with this is I like to describe myself as many things because I think over our lifetime, we can be many things. It's not about being one thing or another. It's about collecting information and knowledge over your lifetime. And basically, you learn one subject and then you can move on to another, and all of that goes in your back pocket. And I think it's really important because in the career conversations I have with people, when they have approached me, I find myself constantly challenging the view that you need to have done so many years of study, so many lines on the CV, more and more certifications and accreditations to even get close to the point where you can stand up in front of a group like this and call yourself an expert. When really, it's just about being brave enough, feeling worthy enough, technical enough in some of the audiences I'm with, to just, be brave and courageous, get up and speak your truth based on the life experiences you have. And so that's what I want to bring to this presentation. So I love learning by doing, and I love learning by learning things as well. And so, gosh darn it, I thought I'd be brave today and call this a bit of a cybersecurity masterclass. But it's a masterclass from my perspective as a psychologist, as a risk manager, as a CIO, as a director of companies. And so that's the lens I want to bring to this presentation today. So what I'm going to talk to you about is cybersecurity. Before I do that, I do want to give a shout out to Cordia, who's the company that I am with, as we are a state-owned enterprise, so a semi-government. So what that means from a security perspective is I get to be involved in a lot of the government groups, which is great. We've got a long history as a New Zealand broadcaster. We operate in Australia and New Zealand, but our real pedigree is secure and robust mission-critical networks. So we're experts in cybersecurity and cloud and secure connection. And we've got a consultancy called Aura Information Security. Hands up, who's familiar with Aura? Few in the audience, and then we've got a managed security service as well through Cordia SecOps. And we're pretty proud of the fact that in the New Zealand market, we're actually one of the largest cybersecurity players. So we've got about 75 cybersecurity experts within the organisation. And we're super diverse. So as I mentioned, we're telecommunications, we're cloud, we do maritime safety, we broadcast TV and radio for New Zealand. There's a lot going on at Cordia. And so what that means from a security perspective is that there's a lot of risk. In fact, I got Aura Information Security, our consultancy, who I procure services through, to come in and do a threat risk assessment for the business, because it's good to do one of those once a year to work out what your key threats are so that you can mitigate them. And they said, Hilary, congratulations, you've got every risk and every threat, so good for you. And I was like, Geez, that's unhelpful. Okay, thanks, guys. But my journey with cybersecurity is definitely one of those ongoing things. I started knowing very little about cybersecurity, like literally nothing. And then I happened to be over in London and I went to work for MI5 looking at security culture, and I became really cybersecurity curious. And then I did a role leading information security for the London Olympic Games, and I started to be more cybersecurity aware and capable and maybe even skilled. But I think cybersecurity, like tech, like digital, it's one of those really fast-moving industries where actually you can't keep up. So you may as well just approach it with a growth mindset. I think I mentioned that at the table, a learning mindset, and just continually growing your experience, which is why conferences like this are really important. And any webinars, seminars, articles you can read, podcasts, they're all so important because you actually can't keep up with things like cyber, tech, and digital. So you can just try your best. The point is you're never going to be a super expert in them either. You can just try and keep your best to keep up. Okay, so in terms of the masterclass today in cybersecurity by Hilary Walton, I've got a bunch of formal learning objectives, which you'll find on your conference program. And then what I decided to do was turn them into learning realities for risk practitioners to bring it to life a little bit. So the first one we're going to cover off is exploring developing trends in cybersecurity and ransomware attacks. So a.k.a. understanding cybersecurity and why you need to focus on this risk. Then we'll discuss what should the role of risk professionals play in managing cybersecurity. For example, have you ever noticed how difficult it can be to get assurance on an enterprise cybersecurity program from your IT, or if you're lucky to have a security department? So we're going to delve into that one. Next, we'll look at understanding information risk and delivering effective information management governance, because basically you can't have security without thinking about your data and information. And I'm going to give you 6 key moves to get a grip on cybersecurity assurance and governance in your business. And lastly, we'll finish off by reviewing what risk lessons can be learned from major recent breaches, because it's so much better to learn from other people's breaches than have to learn from your own. So we'll have a look at that. And all of that is leading to building digital and cyber resiliency in your company. Okay, understanding cybersecurity made easy. It's always really good to explain cybersecurity with a comparison, if you like. So cybersecurity is about layers of protection. At its simplest form, this is how we like to explain it. So putting more layers of protection in place can secure your data, if it's done right, obviously. And this explains why we need things like firewalls, antivirus, as well as good human security practices, passwords of a certain length and things like that, but also putting them in a password manager so that you're not repeating them over different systems, two-factor authentication, all of those are layers of protection. And it's all to reduce your risk, because we want to make the hacker jump through as many hoops as possible to try and get your precious data. So the analogy here is you have some crown jewels. You put them in a locked box, and then you put that locked box in a big locked chest, which is then shut inside a vault. So you're closing the door on that one. And if you expand that analogy further, you can surround everything in a fortress, build a fortress around it. And then you can have castle walls, be protected by a moat, and so on and so on and so on. So in other words, the hacker might be able to get past one layer of defense, but additional protection measures you put in place can make it harder for the wrong people to get access to your precious data. Or you've got sufficient layers that they're going to choose someone else because you're just too hard to crack into. So why is this important in today's society? Well, it's because life for most of us is in a state of permanent digital connectivity. So wherever we are, whatever we do, it's undeniably part of the fabric of our lives. So we are dependent, and actually we're vulnerable. And it's this vulnerability which is the big risk for organisations, because it's no longer a question of if, but when you're going to get done. So cybersecurity risk, like any other business risk, requires our attention and response. And the magnitude of cybercrime is actually staggering, as you can see on this slide. It's also ever present, so it's not really going away in a hurry at all. So according to recent cyber warfare report, it's estimated that cybercrime will cost businesses a mere 10.5 trillion annually by 2025. And just look how much it's been going up each year as well. What else on there? So on the scale of world economies by size, cybercrime is third behind the US and China. Cybercrime is more profitable than the global drug trade, and cybercrime costs more per year than all the natural disasters in the world going on. So yeah, it's a little bit of a big deal. And it's like an arms race, basically, is the way to explain it. Both sides are constantly evolving their tools and tactics and defences, and so you need to continuously evolve yours as well. You don't want to get left behind. You don't want to be carrying that, shield and sword to protect against cyber warfare when they've got a fighter jet that they're fighting it with. So it's no wonder these days that it's high up on many board and business leaders' agendas, and we need to give it regular attention. And adding on to that, there's the changes in privacy law, advances in technology. So yeah, business leaders are looking more at this as their number one risk. Now, who doesn't love the Aon Risk Management Survey? Like, honestly, as risk people, we love this, right? We get very excited. Comes out only twice a year. It's the first thing we do is we get it out, and we do workshops with our exec and board, and it's a really useful tool. So I had to refer back to this particular survey, because it seems it's not just the CEOs and IT leaders that I talk to are worried about cybercrime. It's leaders globally. And you can tell from the stats I showed in the previous slide, some pretty big money that we're talking about here. So needless to say, the risk of cyber attacks and data breaches ranked number one on the survey, and it's also projected, spoiler alert, to be number one in 2024 as well. So in fact, cybersecurity is perceived as a top 10 risk by every surveyed sector, for all job roles, including CFOs, CEOs, and people officers. And this actually really rings true to me, because when I talk to my CEO, he's like, Hilary, if we have a cyber event and it's one that we haven't managed well for some reason, or something we knew about and we didn't fix, that could be an extinction event for us, or at least parts of the business. Definitely, or information security, definitely SecOps and some of the security parts of Cordia. So it is one of those risks that CEOs are saying is going to most disrupt them going forward if they don't have a handle on it. And so speaking of exec and speaking of boards, I think it's useful to now have a little bit of a chat around the board of directors' duties in relation to cyber. And there's some interesting stuff going on, so I'm keeping a close eye on. There's a global trend that the suggestion of director duties and liability with cybersecurity is coming. So, for example, Australia, in their government cybersecurity survey 2020, they haven't updated yet, have just definitely suggested this. But what Australia does, New Zealand does tend to follow. So we definitely could see this, well, not definitely, but we could see this on the horizon for New Zealand. And in addition, we're starting to see some really landmark cases over the ditch in Australia for fines around data and privacy breaches. So Australia have similar laws to us around privacy in terms of fines for businesses, but they up the ante a bit. So for this particular one, on the 10th of May 2022, the Federal Court ruled against RA Advice, which are a financial services organisation. And it's a historical case because the company's being prosecuted for poor cybersecurity practices, and this is the first time. So what did they do wrong? They failed to implement appropriate cybersecurity controls and documents. They failed to identify the causes of cybersecurity incidents, and they failed to use the information it obtained about previous cyber attacks to mitigate the risk of future attacks. So this could be a lot of New Zealand businesses in the line for this. I know we think cybersecurity is, New Zealand is on the other side of the planet, but in general, I think in terms of cybersecurity, we're definitely still on the maturity journey with that. And so what they were fined by a judge and ordered to pay the Australian Securities and Investment Commission $750,000. They had to engage at their own expense an independent security consultancy firm to identify what documentation and controls were necessary. And the kicker here is that they had actually had some cybersecurity reviews done of their company, but they just hadn't implemented all the recommendations and things that came through. So what is the role of company directors in this? Well, directors are interested in the long-term sustainability of the company. So security should be a consideration, irrespective of legislative changes and privacy and things like that. We should do security because we should do security. But I do think that in terms of some of the obligations that directors have, they need to understand, just as business leaders do as well, the approach to cybersecurity and make sure it's an enterprise-wide risk management issue, not just an IT issue. Directors should understand the legal obligations of cyber as they relate to their company's circumstances. And they should have adequate access to cybersecurity expertise and making sure they're having those regular and robust discussions at board meetings. And set the expectation that management will establish that enterprise cyber risk management framework with adequate budget and training as well. And it's all about ongoing sustainability of the company, but also just reducing harm to people. Could be physical harm, emotional harm, financial harm. And at the end of the day, keeping things secure is keeping them safe. Okay, so with that kind of context in mind, what I'd like to do now is I'd like us to have a discussion just at your tables around what's the role of risk professionals in managing cybersecurity risk. Because I have worked as a risk manager and had to keep an eye on enterprise risks, including cyber. Was a little bit nervous at that stage about that. I've worked in a security oversight role, but like without a security team. So, the difficulties in doing that. I've worked as a CIO with responsibility for implementing those security controls. And I've also, in my current role, I've got ultimate responsibility for cybersecurity and the position of that in the company. So there's lots of different lenses that I can bring to this, but I'm really keen to get your thoughts first. So what I'm keen you to get now, just for the next kind of 5 minutes, is discuss what the role is for risk professionals in managing cyber risk. What are some of the challenges in doing so? Because there are challenges. Everyone knows there's challenges. And then lastly, what are some of the solutions to those challenges that you can think of? So really keen to just hear a sample of thoughts from the room. So maybe if I just head to the front table because you're right there, does someone just want to share a couple of things that you were talking about on any of the points?
We talked about the fact that any organisation can be vulnerable, and I referenced my old school who had Hebrew on their coat of arms. They were cyber attacked 6 or 7 years ago by a Palestinian group that was just knocking out anything to do with Jewish, not that my school was Jewish, but it just happened to have it. So the vulnerability is there for any organisation. Talked about some of the solutions, making sure that you've got the right insurance in place. And Aon would like to hear that. But on the counter side of that, if you have ransomware cover, I would imagine, and I've had informed conversations, that if you go to activate that cover, they will dissuade you from doing that because it encourages the attackers. But actually, if you've had a calm conversation with your board about the approach that you would do in advance as part of your cyber plan, then you can make that informed decision. And it's not necessarily the wrong moral decision to pay, because the alternative could be going out of business. That is, of course, you've got honest criminals that will release it, but often they will release it. So making sure that you've had the right discussions at exec and board level about scenarios that could happen.
Great point, particularly on the ransomware discussion with your board prior. So the way I've done that previously is boards always need some information to consume before they can discuss. So writing up a paper doesn't even need to be long, about pros and cons of paying a ransom, essentially, because that's a really good framework for them to think about in terms of what scenarios might they pay, or wouldn't they pay, or wouldn't pay at all. And you're right, every business is different, has different contexts. Some businesses have risks to safety of life. So maybe you might think about it under that, circumstance, or you might just have a blanket, no, we're not paying, but you need to have that discussion before. The reason that's super, super, super key is because if you get done for ransomware, first of all, you have to kick off the investigation. So it might take you 3 or 4 days to even realize it is a ransom and kind of what's going on. And then you're like, oh my gosh, now we need to decide what are we going to do, pay or not pay. And then even if you decide to pay, you're still probably looking at that whole, at least 2 weeks of downtime for your systems, because you've got to get the key, negotiate getting the key. Oh, the key's not working, troubleshoot through that, and then actually decrypt the files and then kind of check they're not in there and get things back. So it's a very long process nonetheless, which is why everyone just wants to avoid ransomware altogether, because it'd be super painful. So thank you, some great points. All right, you choose. Jenny, where do you want to go to next? You know the crowd?
Yeah. I can see a hand.
The other key point you made is that business is digital. And I think a lot of organizations need to get that mindset across. They're no longer a tree company or a mechanical company. They're a digital business. Everything's going digital.
Hi. I think the question was posed, what role does risk professionals play? I guess I asked the question about, why are we even asking this question? Why is it considered separate from risk management? And I guess some of the feedback came back from, there was a time where you could separate technology from your business, but now your business is inherently linked to technology. And I think some of the challenges in getting that across is around a mindset change and demystifying what cyber is, demystifying the acronyms and showing it compared to other risks, say, health and safety and any other risk, that it can be easily understood as well.
Yes.
And I think also a solution would be around understanding, following the first point, understanding the business impact of a cyber event and not just the technical impact, but the financial impact and the broader business impact from that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's another risk to manage within the business. That is the absolute message that we talk about over and over again. Treat it like a financial risk. Treat it like a health and safety risk, please. This is just another risk that needs to be managed. Right, maybe just one more table before we move on to the next.
I just wonder if there's any table who'd had a discussion following on from the discussion we had yesterday as to whether they look after, as a risk manager, cyber risks, or whether the IT team look after it, and are they keen to take it or keen to not take it? Any volunteers? There we go.
Oh, thank you.
So I oversee business and safety risk, which helps, can I just say? Part of our business risk, obviously, is cyber. Now, cyber isn't a standalone risk. It sits under business disruption for us, but it also sits under fraud and corruption. So it interlinks with a number of our business critical risks. So I oversee the facilitation of those, but the risk owners are the executives that sit at the table. And that's where, in my view, it sits.
Yes, yeah. And absolutely nail on the head. That's something that I think as security or IT people, where we need to get better at pushing that risk to the risk owners and where it belongs, rather than holding on to it ourselves and trying to manage that risk because it's not sitting at the right level. So yeah, good point. Okay, thank you. That was a great discussion. I'm sure there would have been lots of other really interesting comments around the room, which I would have loved to have heard if we had time. But anyway, thank you so much. Okay, so this is a question I get asked by senior managers, execs, directors. Are we doing well, or are we just lucky? So if you're not getting good reporting about cybersecurity coming to you regularly, and then you're wondering, is it all in check? Is the security program working? Or is it because your business just doesn't know or doesn't have visibility, or is it by sheer luck? And the key to this, from my perspective, is security governance, security governance, security governance. So how do you govern cybersecurity is the next topic here I want to discuss. And I've got 6 key moves that I want to talk to you about. And look, they're not actually rocket science. There may be things that your businesses are already doing, but I think just making sure that you're following those 6 key moves, particularly if you're starting from a place of being really unsure if you're just lucky, then this will hopefully really help out your business. So the first key move is to get the business clear on the highest levels of your security policy. So for me, when I enter a security role, this is the first move I do. It's to get the business really clear on roles and responsibilities. And in fact, you probably did it when you started your risk role. You were like, the risk belongs to the business. Let's get everyone clear on how we're going to manage risk across the business. Because just like risk, or because it is a risk, security is everywhere. So everyone has responsibilities, all staff, line managers, exec, technology leaders as well, sure, risk and assurance departments, project managers, legal team, the property management, HR, the board, it's literally everywhere. So for me as a CISO, it's not, I drive risk and I drive security, and I love security within the company, and I'm the one there behind it going, come on guys, we need to do security, but it's actually done through the business as a bit of a matrix. So you need to be clear on what security looks like. What's your security objective? So what's your security goal? Is it just to swim faster than the other fishes out there so that the sharks take kind of them? Or is it like for our business, we want to be a best-in-class security company. That's what we want to do, because that really sets the tone for what you do with security. Next, there'll be a number of security principles that you're going to live by as an organization. Very similar to health and safety as well. So we talk a lot about health and safety being everyone's responsibility. Well, security is everyone's responsibility as well. In fact, if you can buddy up with your health and safety people as much as possible, much more mature genre, they've gone through it all, and there's lots of good things that you can use from them as well. And so next, it's roles and responsibilities. And so if you haven't already done this, then sit down with the key people in your company, or go around them individually, or whatever makes sense. But literally try and fill in this table. What are the security responsibilities for all staff and contractors? And you can actually look at health and safety, because they have some really good responsibilities for staff. But it'll be things like making sure they're raising security risks, doing security awareness training, suggesting security improvements, and so on and so forth. But each of those different areas of the organization will have a different focus on security. So the HR team, they should be running the implementation of personnel security. So this is your security vetting of staff, making sure that people join, move, and leave securely and don't kind of take access with them. You might have a property management team who are really interested in physical security of your offices, your sites, whatever it might be. There will be your information asset owners, who are your business leaders who own certain types of information and data. They will have certain responsibilities, as well as the technology people, as well as the executive and the board. So get people really clear across all of that. The next key move is sorting out your security governance arrangements. And the hint is it's not just the IT who's part of this. So this is a bit of a snapshot of what my security governance arrangements look like, although I've kind of tried to genericize it a little bit. I have some colleagues in the room who have sort of seen this before as well. It's a tried and tested framework that has been developed. So basically what this is about is I have two governance groups. I've got my management group. So they're responsible for management oversight of security. They're looking at they're involved in the day-to-day implementation of the security program. And there's a number of different people who are involved in that. It is mainly technology people, but we also put in HR people and health and safety, just to make sure we've got some spread across departments. And the information that this group consumes rolls up into the security governance group, which is your exec team, and maybe a few others that you add in there as well. If health and safety isn't on the exec, you want to add them in, and whoever else makes sense. The governance group is about governance oversight, so it's a higher level of information that they're looking at, and they're really overseeing the implementation of the program. And then you've got some people who might belong in both groups, like I'm in both groups because I'm running them. I also have my chief digital officer in both groups as well, because I actually report into him and then into the CEO. Now, the key with this is it helps people get really clear on the security program and security risks, and you're having all the right discussions. But it's also just an amazing awareness campaign. because everyone's all a bit nervous about security and cybersecurity. And, so basically by meeting with them monthly, you're getting them involved. You can teach them something new every time. And then so after you've done sort of 6 months of this, all of a sudden the game changes in terms of the conversations, and they can actually start acting like security governors or security managers because they're learning as they go. So this is my hot tip in terms of security governance. Next, so you've got really clear on roles and responsibilities. You've got your governance arrangements setting up, and it'll evolve over time. But the other thing you want to make sure is your next key move is making sure you know what your critical or key assets are. And that might be people, or it might be information, technologies, or facilities. And basically, how I've gone through this process before is I've literally gone around people in the organisation and we've written down what all the systems are to start with. Sometimes that's a good place to start. And then against each system, we've looked at if we lost, so in security, we love to talk about CIA, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It's a tried and true cybersecurity model that gets rolled out. But have a look at, with said system, let's say it's ServiceNow, because lots of people have that. If you breached confidentiality with that system, if data was leaked, what's the risk impact? If you breached integrity, so it was tampered with, you couldn't trust the data, what's the risk level there? And then also with availability. And once you risk assess CIA, you can kind of add that up to get a risk score. You do that with all your systems, and then eventually you're going to get about 10 or so pop to the top. And so that's your key information assets. Another key consideration you may want to just add on top of that is privacy information. Does the system contain privacy information? That's something new that I've seen added in as well. So you've got your key assets, you've risk assessed which ones are the most important. Next, you want to think about, well, what are the risks associated with those different assets? The things that if you don't manage, then you're going to have a problem. So on this slide, I've got quite a generic list of cybersecurity risks. So a significant security event caused by one of these things might be lack of security by design, might be poor physical security, unpatched systems, lack of shadow IT management. So your organisation is bound to have some or all of these risks, maybe some others that aren't on there as well. But think about what your key risks are here associated with your information assets, because that's where you need to focus your attention, and it's going to help you make business decisions, investment decisions. And then also once you've got your risks, you can work out, well, how good are my controls? So as you can see, I'm speaking your risk language here. Okay, so the fifth key move is to find out how security controls are performing. How do you do that? Maybe you're not aware of what all the security controls are. Well, there are many security models and frameworks that you can choose that provide a really excellent structure for you to design your security controls and your program around. There is ISO 27001, which is the International Standard on Information Security. There is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is commonly mentioned as well. There is the Centre for Internet Security, or CIS, Critical Security Controls. So there's a lot of these around. Some of them are quite large, a little bit scary, hard to kind of comprehend and read. Or you might have NZISM, that's the government one as well. So I guess it's understood that for businesses of all shapes and sizes, not everyone can comply with ISO or NIST or NZISM. But so there are other models that can be used, or you might want to work your way up to these other standards. So you can look at CERT-NZ has 10 critical controls, which is another really good framework. And actually, I found out recently, can't believe I didn't know this, but on the website, you can actually shape those 10 critical controls for the size of your organization. So you can select small, medium, large, and it will give you kind of a more grandiose version of those controls. So that's very handy. In addition, you can use other ones like our team of experts at OR. We developed the top 10 controls that you see up here, which kind of takes into consideration CERT as well as NZISM and 27001 into kind of a more unique one. So that might be another tool that you can use. But whatever you do, it's a good idea to look at what are those areas or those control areas where you're currently and then where you want to be. because that's going to work out your roadmap and your plan. And then you can then, even present this to boards or execs, and they can start to make risk-based decisions around their risk tolerance about whether they're comfortable or not that, said security awareness control is at a maturity level 1, really need to get that up to 3. And so then, these investment decisions can flow. Now, I have to say, as a security professional, I have a love and hate relationship with assessing security maturity because it's my baby. And it is poking my baby. And it's funny. It's, I think, for all organizations, and when they go through this experience, like, it's so good to go through. But you've got to go through with the right mindset, which is continuous improvement. Remove don't think about it as an audit. It's not an audit. It's not like one of those financial audits where they, hide stuff away. It is a security improvement program. It's a review, and you need to get people on board with that, because otherwise, people can get a little bit defensive through this process from time to time, because things are coming to light which people didn't know. Oh my gosh, this is really, really bad. We need to improve this. Why did the IT or security team or the risk people not tell me? So when you start going into these assessments, a little bit painful to begin with, but so much good can come out the back. That's just a bit of a more detailed view on those top 10 controls, and I am going to supply my slides to the group so you can have a look at those. Because what do? You assess your controls, and then where your gaps are, that's what you pull into your security strategy. For me, security strategies are about co-development. I'm a cybersecurity expert, but I'm not a cybersecurity expert of everything. I've got my wheelhouse. I like risk, I like security governance, I like compliance. But am I super very technical, can operate a firewall? No, just found that out. We purchased a FortiGate firewall for home. I was like, I'll just give this a crack with some YouTube videos. My team do it all the time, no problem. No, going to have to get someone technical and help me with that one. So we all have our wheelhouse. So make sure you've got people across the organisation who can feed into this to get their buy-in and drive the program forward. Think about a 3-year strategy as well, rather than just one. Also, because when you have these assessments, the teams usually always recommend that you deliver the outcomes of these assessments over 24 months at least. Unless you're my organisation and they're like, no, Hilary, we're going to do 12 months. I'm like, okay, that probably makes sense because we are trying to be a best in breed security company. But anyway, it's usually a longer road, a longer journey for cybersecurity maturity. Okay, so to finish, I wanted to just talk about lessons learned from previous cybersecurity incidents, because I just think as soon as one happens, like, my thought goes to, could that be us? If it could be us, how can I make sure that I'm filling those gaps to make sure that it won't impact us as much? And cyber's one of those things where sometimes, unless you have a good incident, people don't pay attention. But if you can kind of bring them to the forefront of people's attention, which the media does a great job of, then this can really help. So here are some examples of things that have happened recently. I'm not going to go into each and every one of them. You will recognise some of these. So over the last kind of couple of years, there was Travelex. There were some passports that got leaked from a property management company. Even schools have cyber attacks as well, by the way. So St. Peter's College had its ransomware attack. And then you get these other events, which are cyber events as well, but they're a little bit different, which is like what we call 0 days in cybersecurity language, like the Log4Shell, Log4j as risk people. Did that hit your company's radar? Probably did for your IT teams. But a 0 day means that a vulnerability has been found in a piece of software, and it's been actively exploited right now. So whenever these advisories come out, teams have to jump. Now, the problem is vulnerabilities come out quite often, and they ebb and flow. There's vulnerabilities every month, but then you also have patching cycles which cover them off. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to know, as risk professionals, as cybersecurity professionals, do I need to lean into this one? Is this one that I need to take notice of? So sometimes that can be a little tricky, but Log4j was definitely one that people had to lean in, and it happened around Christmas as well, which is really unfortunate. Sorry about that. So these are the types of cybersecurity events. What can we learn from them? Okay, well, here's kind of a brief list, and I'm sure there's much more lessons that can be learned, but some of the key ones I wanted to talk to you about. So the number one thing is to worry about your people. And this is actually on a couple of fronts, one more caring than others, maybe. So the other one front is that human factors plays a role in 98% of cybersecurity incidents. So we need to focus on people in terms of being the first, kind of layer of defense, that human firewall, making sure they're doing the right behavior, spotting things, telling you about things, acting, leaning into events when they happen. The other part of it is when cyber attacks happen, often everyone jumps in and then the attack actually goes on for a number of days or weeks or longer. And you need to worry about your people in terms of making sure not everyone jumps in all at once, because you may need to actually shift work that cyber event, particularly if it's one of these big ones like we had on the previous slide. The other point is plans that are drafted but not put into place are really bad. And, we've probably all got some examples of policies we've written and haven't quite published, or I thought I'd published it on SharePoint, but then I hadn't actually done the major publish. Have you done that? That's really annoying. So I could see it, but no one else could. Anywho, but plans that are drafted are really bad. So make sure you've got a plan. A checklist is a really super good tip that came out of most of these events as well, because there's so much going on and there's only so much people can handle. If you have a sort of incident response checklist, that can be really helpful in terms of, who are the stakeholders we need to involve? What are the legal considerations we need to be considering? How are we going to run the investigation? And Cordia are just developing one of these at the moment that we're going to be pushing out in a month or so. So maybe if I can keep in touch with the organisers, we can kind of give you that and you can reuse for your own purposes. Companies should pick a cybersecurity framework. So we've already talked about that and the importance of that, but make sure your company is choosing one, even if it's just the certain Z10 critical controls. It does drive a roadmap and investment decisions. Don't wait for the crisis to hit. Start looking for outside help. So legal, public relations, business continuity. Think about all that ahead of time and have people signed up. And engagement is key, making sure that you lean into that event when it's happening and don't kind of have that kind of hands off and just kind of let the IT or security team control it on their own. And then lastly, it really is practicing your playbook. So there's just a different mindset when we practice a plan. It's way different from just reading a document. I know we've all experienced that. So make sure you have your plan practice, and ideally just little mini exercises, because if you do a big one, it can be really full on and complex, but little mini ones will give you the improvements that you need as well. And so I just want to leave you with this, because this was kind of an interesting stat from the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre. Only a third of organisations surveyed by them possessed and tested an incident response plan in the previous year. Only a third. And only 41% of the organisations were either mildly confident or not confident in their ability to detect a cyber intrusion. So, we are all on the journey with cybersecurity. It's not easy. It's a lot of work that needs to be involved there. But we need to think about it as enterprise risks, and also just even think about health and safety and how you can apply that to security, because it's the same, but different in some ways. And the last thing I want to leave you with is just like health and safety, you just have to know enough of it. And if you do a few courses or webinars or whatever, then you build your skills. You don't have to be a super expert in cybersecurity to be able to think of, we should identify our assets and, think about the risk. Like that's just risk management, which you do all to a T. So just step up and own your cybersecurity space and treat it like an enterprise risk. So thank you.
Fabulous. So some questions. So, yep. Awesome. So first question I've got here is, what do you think about the Essential 8 from Australia as a framework to use in New Zealand?
I think it's another good framework. It's very much like the CERT Top 10. It's just another one that Australia's put out. I had it on my list and I just scribbled it off just because it was a lot of words and I was trying to trim it down. So the Australian one is really good as well. Actually, I do love what Australia is doing over there. Like they are super taking cybersecurity seriously. They have recently appointed a cybersecurity minister whose only job is cybersecurity. I'm not saying we should do that in New Zealand necessarily, but there's something about giving, focus to a portfolio that really matters. If we think about New Zealand, so our current minister has cyber and health huge. Not saying it's not possible, but I'm just saying Australia has some good stuff that we can look across the ditch to.
Yeah. Next one. Why is New Zealand lately prone to DDoS attacks, and what can we do to prevent it?
We were actually always prone to DDoS attacks. That's a really old attack that's been around for years and years. It's a smaller scale of that happens a lot in the gaming industry. Like, the gamers will buy a DDoS attack pack and DDoS their mate so that they can't play their video game properly. In terms of New Zealand, I think it wasn't just New Zealand, it was happening everywhere. But interestingly, with DDoS being so huge for a while, and then ransomware had its moment, what's happened is New Zealand organisations have gone some way to shore up some of their defences around that, which is great. And then apparently the ransomware criminal gangs in particular are actually starting to get a bit frustrated because it's not as easy as it was a few months ago.
Good. Any from the room? Yes, one over here.
Hi, Hilary. Thanks very much for your presentation. It was excellent.
Thank you.
I've got a question for you. I'm from the forestry industry, and we manage 3 plantation forests here in New Zealand. But we recently are now part of a wider company, which is a financial services company in the US. And all of the IT function is performed in the US. We don't have any IT here in New Zealand, any IT person.
Yes.
If we have day-to-day issues, we simply use Spark. But anything that's sort of system related typically has a time frame in terms of turnaround from the US. I report into 3 separate board entities for those 3 managed estates. And obviously the directors are worried about cybersecurity, and with everything that's happening in the legislative area at the moment, it's going to come a point where the directors will have to know a lot more about what's actually happening.
Yes.
And I'm finding it really, really difficult to get any form of information around data security policies, all of those sorts of things out of the US. And I just was wondering whether you've got any ideas, suggestions, or whether you've seen this sort of thing come up in the past, because I've got it as extreme on my risk register, but it's really proving to be quite troublesome, and I'm wanting to obviously, work alongside the boards and help them as much as they can from a governance perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking, is there a way to localise that risk register? Like even with introduction, you can talk about private, so things that are relative to New Zealand. You could talk about privacy laws, kind of risks, and get, maybe if there's a bunch of local risks that might get more traction. But that's really frustrating if they won't give you the information that you need. And all your process comes from this other entity. That is an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Apart from a local risk register and trying to raise visibility. Yeah. Yes. So if it comes, it's not, answer for everything, but if someone did a cybersecurity review of your patch, what would that look like? Is that possible to do? Yeah. Help. Yeah. Good question.
The common risks facing all businesses is the war on talent.
Yes.
And no bigger area where that has been faced right now is tech or cybersecurity. Are you seeing any trends or have any tips for organisations to work through that?
So, yeah, we're a tech company as well, so we have that issue. And what are the trends? So I don't know about you, but I get the feeling that there was this kind of great resignation and this whole tidal wave of people changing roles, and maybe they, it was just that change in mindset of not being so tied to the organisation. Maybe they were going to leave kind of anyway, but had put it off, and then it was like, oh, actually now I feel comfortable doing that. But I think I've actually noticed that kind of trailing off recently. Fingers crossed. I do our stats every month around how many people have left the business but haven't had their IT account deactivated, which is normally very good. But I keep an eye on it just in case. And we didn't have anyone leave in July. I was like, really? Like, that's interesting. So I don't know. I get the sense that maybe some of that is tailing off, but I also get the feeling that applicants in the market are still wanting 30% more in terms of salary than they have before. So it's still there. But I just think you've got to obviously get people in the door and maybe growing talents away, but you just got to really love them, like super looking out for their needs and, understanding their private life and what's going on. I just think that whole loving people and caring for people in a way that maybe we haven't done well as organisations in the past is the way that you got to keep talent.
Can I chip in something on that point? Because I had some conversations a couple of months ago with some of the polytechs, and they had students who were coming out with diplomas, for example, in security, and then not being able to get jobs because the problem is they don't have enough to go and get a job in a security company. But if you advertised for people to come in as cadets into your organization on the basis it's a business, and then say that you'll pay extra money for people who've got a security qualification, but then not necessarily going to use it immediately, it may be that there's a whole bunch of people you can grow into your business that we haven't tapped into. And the other thing I've noticed, which is hampering things, is recruitment firms just automatically mandating a requirement for a qualification when there are so many jobs in security which are not coding and they're not directly on the tools as there might be, that there's a whole bunch of jobs that people could be doing that don't need a security qualification in a qualification team, but somebody in your HR department or in a recruitment firm is doing the lazy easy thing and specifying a qualification, and then the bots are bouncing people.
Yeah, so there's room for everyone in cybersecurity, which is amazing. There's half of it is the technical, very deep stuff, and then half of it is just common sense, frameworks, risk, policy. I mean, I got a security role with no qualification. I got one once I started because I was like, well, I better get one just to make myself feel better and learn the frameworks that I need. But yeah.
There we go. And sadly, on that note, we should draw the conversation to an end. So thank you, Hilary, for a great session.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'll just mention as well, just in terms of resources, I mentioned the executive checklist, which I'll see if I can get out to people once we have officially publicised it. The other thing is that policy around high-level security, that was released into the Protective Security Requirements Resource Hub. So if people are in sort of semi-government departments and part of that, you might be able to download it from there. And if that doesn't work, then I can probably look to get a vanilla version out, because I just think role and responsibilities is key. So any way I can help.
Yeah, and then I think final thing is Hilary and I are going to do some work together, because I've been working on how to scare the bejesus out of your boards and your executives so that they'll give you more money to manage the risk. So we'll put some stuff out there together just to help you with scaring people to take more attention. So.
Thanks.